Welcome to What We Made Possible, the podcast where we explore the power of healing and driving change for advocates, leaders, and change makers. The conversations here draw the connection between creating new possibilities in the world, possibilities of care, of belonging, of thriving for our communities, with stories of personal healing and loving relationship building. I'm your host, Patti, Dayleg, leadership coach for social change. I spent a decade in nonprofits, government, and DEI, securing 6- and 7-figure opportunities for communities of color. And I've experienced firsthand the transformative power of compassion, healing, and belonging in making a bigger impact. Let's dive in. Hi, and welcome to What We Made Possible. I'm Patti Dayleg, and this is the podcast about what happens when we focus on healing and how that impacts our work, our communities, and honestly, our entire lives. This space is about transformation, not just individual, but collective. It's about choosing ourselves and grounding in our values, and how when we do that, that creates ripples that strengthens our teams, it strengthens our organizations and our movements for social change. If you've ever wondered what's possible when we lead with healing and connection as opposed to we just got to do the thing, then you're in the right place. So let me tell you a little bit about the name, What We Made Possible. When I say we, I mean the relationships we build, how we hold and support each other, how we navigate challenges together. But it's also about the relationship that we have with ourselves, acknowledging that our healing is just as vital to creating impact as the work that we do. It was, I think, Prentice Hemphill in their book, What It Takes to Heal, where they say that when we are doing our work, right, like when you are working towards food justice, working towards environmental change, working towards better outcomes for people, you're not stopping eating, not dancing. You're not stopping your listening to music, right? So why would we stop our healing? These are happening at the same time. And in fact, when we are healing and when we do it together, then our impact is even greater. Right? So that's the we part of what we made possible. And then there's the possibilities. So this podcast is really about the possibilities that emerge when we center healing in our leadership and our lives. I'm going to use this as a space where I share lessons from my journey and amplify the voices of people who've inspired me, leaders, advocates, my teachers, whose work have really expanded my own idea of what's possible, not just in my life, right? Like my money, my family, my career, all of that, but also what's possible in our world. Before we dive in, and I'm so excited to share, I want to share a little bit about myself because I believe in relationship before task. And for me, that means, again, that connection comes first. It's about that we. So it's about building trust. It's about understanding where someone is coming from and creating a foundation for meaningful work. So I'm inviting you to be part of this space. And that means that first and foremost, I want you to know a little bit about who I am and what brought me here. So I'm the daughter of Filipino immigrants. I'm the eldest granddaughter on both sides of my family. I'm also the first daughter of a first daughter. My parents came to the US young, like right out of college, and they were really highly educated. They went to some of the oldest and most prestigious schools in Asia, but when they came to the US, it was about starting over and over and over. My dad tells a story of when he was delivering cakes for a bakery, and he came to work one day and the bakery burned down. And on that day, it happened to be his birthday. And so he had to pivot really fast, being a new immigrant. And then when I was just about a month old, maybe a little bit more, we were living in San Francisco in Daly City. And there was a huge earthquake, 7 point something on the scale. And there's actually an exhibit for that earthquake today in the Oakland Museum because it was so impactful. It was the first televised earthquake in the world because it was during the World Series. And my parents, who were new immigrants, were like, nope. And they pieced out to the East Coast where they had to start over again. And so from them, I really learned that art of the pivot, right? That resourcefulness, that resilience. And that has shaped every step of my journey. I've navigated my share of pivots too. Right out of college, I thought I was going to medical school. So I took a job in the pharmaceutical industry. I was putting money in a millionaire's pocket. He was a cool millionaire, but he was a millionaire. And I did well enough on the entrance exam, the MCAT, to get into med school. But I pivoted to public health instead, where I was the only person in my class to study Asian American health. That was right around the time of the Affordable Care Act. So while I was in grad school and after I graduated, I spent a few years in nonprofit advocating for better access to healthcare resources for immigrant communities, often in environments where funding and leadership were unstable. I worked in an organization where we had 5 executive directors in 4 years. And this was pre, Stop Asian Hate, before the funding started flowing for Asian American organizations, where the conversation around mental health for Asian Americans was in the mainstream. We were educating elected officials, funders about the model minority myth, saying like, no, there is poverty within these communities. There are challenges for access, for health outcomes for these communities. And because lack of knowledge among those decision makers, that made the organizational experience being an advocate really, really challenging. Again, 5 executive directors in 4 years, that instability was really tough. From there, I moved into government to find more security, as one does, only to discover that I was navigating politics in a DEI role, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I thought that I was just working in an agency, going to be a public servant. And little did I know, I was being placed into an elected official's office within the executive cabinet, not reporting directly to the elected, but I was reporting to a deputy. And that was also challenging as well, the politics of that, small p politics and big P politics in New York City. And when that term ended, I found myself on Broadway, where I experienced firsthand that sometimes burnout, that's the cost of bringing magic to the stage. All of this pivot, amidst all of that, I also wrestled with self-doubt, with imposter syndrome. There was a moment in government where I was offered a promotion and a $20,000 raise, and I said no because I was afraid of what that responsibility entailed. It was second to the chief in that position. And I was nervous, even though I had done the work already. And 6 months later, I found myself continuing to do that work. And I walked into my boss's office and I said, I feel like the deputy. And she said, oh, thank God, because she never hired for that position. She took a chance and waited for me to realize that I was already in this role. And once I said yes to the job, once I said yes to the title change and the promotion, it was 6 months later, which means that I lost half of that money, $10,000, to my own imposter syndrome, my own self-doubt. I had to ask myself, what's actually holding me back from being in that position, right? From stepping into that power. I was already doing it, and it was my own thoughts that kind of held me back despite all of these powerful pivots. And it's funny because the people that I work with, there's a lot of folks who've also experienced that loss, experienced that saying no to themselves when they're so close. People have said no to relationships that they really want to be in because they don't think they deserve it. I have a client who admitted that she put in an offer on a house, got imposter syndrome, got self-doubt, like doubted herself, and then pulled her offer. And years later, she was able to buy a house, but she held that back from herself. And that question, right, of what is holding me back became a turning point in my healing. It's also a question for the people who I work with. This is something that I also saw in my relationships, personal and professional. The way that I showed up to those relationships was really tied to my sense of enoughness. So there is a moment, my 25th birthday, where I found myself in emergency surgery. And the person that I was seeing at the time didn't even visit me in the hospital. Now, you know me at this point. I'm about showing up for ourselves, showing up for each other. And this person literally did not show up, like was not physically there, did not put in that effort to be there for me. And in that moment, it was that same question of like, okay, what is holding me back from being in a relationship where I can receive love, where I can be loved? And if I'm not going to get it here, that doesn't mean that it's not available to me, but that doesn't mean that it's not available somewhere else. And so that moment was really the first time that I held a personal boundary and put myself and my values first. And I'm in a relationship now. I just got engaged to someone else. And that's because I decided to ground in my own values. I decided to ground in my compassion to myself. And that showed. That showed in my relationships. It showed in my leadership. The more I grounded in self-compassion and aligned with my values, the more I could lead with clarity, with purpose, with a sense of worth. And when we are trying to create change in the world, right, we're trying to create a better world for others, we are also part of that. And so when I work with folks, it's about how do I ground in myself? How do I include myself in the thing that is changed, in the world that is changed? How do I include myself as well? And so today, I get to coach and I consult full time, one more pivot, right? Helping leaders and organizations unlock what's possible when they center their healing, when they center the wellness of their people, when they center sustainability of their work. It's not just about individual transformation. It's about creating spaces and systems where leaders feel grounded in their values, confident in their impact, where teams collaborate more effectively and communicate with intention, where organizations can reduce their burnout, where they foster inclusivity, where they retain underrepresented staff, where they don't have to operate how they did when they were in corporate or when they were in a predominantly white institution that was toxic and top down, where they can operate from a place of cultural responsiveness, where they can have a workplace that's rooted in care, where their communities benefit from those programs as well. So this podcast is an extension of that work. It's for really anyone navigating leadership, growth, or change, whether you're building coalitions, whether you're leading a nonprofit, or working to align your career with your values. So in this series, whenever you're going to be with me in this space, you'll find stories and insights and reflections on what it means to lead from a place of healing. My hope is that these conversations inspire you towards embracing your enoughness, towards leading into connection, and moving toward the future that you want to create. Thank you for being here for this first episode, this first intro. This work is supported by community. And so what often happens is I'll meet someone, whether out in the field or online, in person, and then they're like, I think my organization needs you. I'm going to introduce you to my executive director, or I'm going to introduce you to my operations director. if this episode resonated with you, if you want to bring me into your organization or an organization that could use this work to amplify their impact, you can find me on LinkedIn at Patricia Dayleg, or you can subscribe to my email list. It's called A Sunday Kind of Love. And make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. I would love for you to leave a review. It helps others find this work, join the conversation, find organizations that are trying to lead with more connection and more healing. We're going to talk more next time about what compassion looks like in leadership. And before I go, I want to leave you with this. When you center healing, when you remind yourself that you're enough, it becomes easier to ground yourself in your values, to act from possibility, and to move toward the future that you want. This podcast is an invitation to explore what's possible for yourself, your leadership, for your communities. Thanks for being here. I'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to What We Made Possible. I really hope this episode resonated. As a coach, I always end with action steps, and so I invite you to do something, which is to pause and ask yourself, what resonated? What am I taking away? And what's possible for me and my community now? If you liked this conversation, please leave a review and a rating. It helps so much. Thanks again.